And the same thing's happening in their states. The answer is that there is an exodus. And I don't think that's too strong a word out of the cities. People are put off by cities. Have always been a period of cities are looking, you have a lot of noise and some dirt and some hassles and maybe a slightly higher crime rate. But on the other hand, you have art and culture and museums and shows and restaurants and bars. And so you make the trade-off. You say, I'll accept these annoyances in exchange for all this, culture and buzz, and cities attract, the brightest people. So whether it's your bankers or lawyers or doctors, artists, playwrights, actors, whatever, it's just, there's a lot of buzz. That's why people go to cities. With these lockdowns, we've amplified all the negatives and taken away all the positives. We've shut the museums, the restaurants, the bars, who plays, office buildings, things that attracted people. But meanwhile, again, probably not as bad in Australia as it is here. But crime is on the rise. Murder rate in New York has doubled. Suicide rates across the country have tripled. And that's New York. And the suicide rate's national. There are all these dysfunctions, and a lot of them. And of course, when you have highly concentrated populations, which you do in cities, a lot of us, so what people are doing, I say people, it's the people who can afford it. The getting out of the cities and the going to nearby suburbs, or even further out, what we call ex-service, which are, the next ring beyond the suburbs. And so there is that demand for housing. I'll be willing to bet money that place you're describing is a pretty attractive neighborhood. So they're booming. And the same thing is true in the United States. But what's the other side of that? We're depopulating our cities. Cities are the greatest wealth generating phenomena in the history of civilization. And that's what civilization means. It means cities. And so if we're depopulating and draining our wealth creating engine, what does that do to the economy long run? So for us as an individual choice, and makes sense, and I understand it. But the macro effect is for depopulating these wealth generating places. I mean, just take any downtown area. It could be Melbourne or Adelaide or Sydney or New York for that matter. If there's an attractive downtown office building, let's say you're a large company, Surrance company, wherever it used to have 10 floors as your corporate headquarters. Well, now everyone's working from home for almost a year. That's nothing that anyone would have recommended, a year ago, but we were forced to do it. And guess what? It works. Billers and employers are finding that, hey, it works. You can communicate and get stuff done. And maybe there's some attractions to it. So this work from home thing is here to stay. What companies will do, they'll say, well, instead of 10 floors, I only need 2 floors, and I'll have attractive offices. But though you'll reserve them, you'll call up, say, I did an office 2 days next week. To me, some clients done, they'll build locker rooms. They won't be like high school locker rooms will be very attractive. No, keep your laptop and your sweater and your scarf or whatever in your locker. You'll show up, take yourself out of your locker. It was some receptions. We'll tell you what your office is yours for those 2 days. Set yourself up, meet your clients, go home and work from home. What does that mean? If you've got commercial real estate capacity or utilization by 80%, we'll start with the cleaning crew and the reception. But what about the food trucks, the restaurants, the shopping, the public transportation, drinks after work, on and on and on, all the things that are ancillary to that downtown office location. You cut that by 50 to 80%. What does that do to your economy? So these are example by this will take a year to play out. This is not an overnight thing. So the tenants are not paying rent. If they are, they've caught up and negotiated at 50% increases. I have some involvement in commercial real estate, and I've seen this in real time. So rents are down by perhaps half or all the way to zero if they're not paying. Never says, well, landlord's restaurant tonight, the landlords take the rest of the day, and mortgages. So if the tenants aren't paying the landlords can pay the mortgagee, and that falls on the banks, right? Except the banks are clever. They've securitized and sold it. Probably they do right? Looking here, we have our 401 Kelvins is like a superannuation fund. But you look in the fund and do you have some, commercial real estate REIT or something that Morgan Stanley sold you? Well, maybe you do. And what's inside, no one knows. But take a look. So, but that ripple effect I just described can take a year to play out. So we haven't seen the end of this. So the bottom line in all this is that interest rates are going up in anticipation of inflation based on handouts. The reality is the handouts are not being spent to being saved, which does nothing for inflation. And it's also not sustainable, which is what are you going to do? Hand out a $2 trillion deficit spending package every 6 months? Because that's kind of what we've been doing since last summer. They keep saying this is the last one, it would be sustainable. It's not sustainable. It's a handout and people need the money. But if they put it in the bank, which to do it, this is a classic liquidity trap. So what's going to happen? But meanwhile, while the interest rates are going up, perhaps for the wrong reason, but they're going up, that's going to slow the economy further. We're already seeing mortgage applications dry up. We've seen the housing bubble, not bubble, but pretty steep increase in residential housing starting to level. So by, our disabled, I would say by March or April, this whole thing is going to go and reverse everything we just talked about. It's going to go to reverse. The economy is not going to have the traction. Unemployment is going to remain high velocity, is going to continue to drop. There's not going to be an inflation. Those interest rates are headed when they're going to drop and the price of gold is going to shoot up. So my advice to potential investors is it's on sale, go get some right now. So it's better to buy low and sell high and expect the price to be much higher by mid-year. I'll cover things or the short answers you can use. In theory, you can go to negative rates. The negative rates don't work. We have experience from the ECB, Sweden, Japan, Switzerland, and elsewhere. The negative rates don't work. They're negative rates, but it's not more the same. Cutting rates from 3% to 0 has a beneficial effect. The cutting from 0 to -1. Now you're through the looking glass. You don't get any more pop. You don't get any more bang for the buck. And the reasons for that, which are what is a central bank, what signal are you sending? See, the idea of negative rates is you're going to spend the money, because if I'm going to take it away, you put money in the bank, even 0, you put money in the bank, you go away for your comeback. The same amount of money should be there. That's the 0% interest rate. But a negative interest rate, -1%, you put $100,000 in the bank, you go away for, you come back, you only have $99,000. Because I took $1,000 trillion shots, 1% negative interest. So the idea is, I'm going to take your money, you're going to spend too fast, because he longs to take your money. And that's going to have the stimulative effect that we talked about the site. Actually, what happens, two things. Number one, people have lifetime goals, their retirement, their healthcare, their parents' healthcare, their children's education, buying a house to some large lifetime goal you have. And that's why you save money in the first place. If I'm taking your money away, you're going to save more, not less. You still want to achieve that goal. I've made it more difficult, but you're actually going to save more. They want you to spend it, but now you're saving more. And the second thing is, what signal is the central bank sending when they have negative interest rates or saying that they're worried about deflation, not inflation? So if if central bank is telling me that inflation is a problem, I'm going to wait. Why should I buy anything right now when the price drops? And by the way, a negative interest rate, -1%. My example is a nominal phenomena. But in real terms, if you have deflation, my money is worth more. So even though my dollar amount may be less, my purchasing power went up because prices went down. And so negative. That's why negative interest rates don't work, because you're sending a deflation signal. So people defer spending and be their lifetime goal. So they actually save more. So negative rates, summer. So you see, right, you're stuck at 0. You can do QE, you can do quantitative easing. And usually what happens is they hand the ball over, it's a rugby match or whatever, but they hand the ball from monetary policy, which is now impotent, to fiscal policy, which is deficit spending. But there you have other kinds of headwinds having to do with very high debt levels. More to the point in terms of, what a central bank can actually do. They can't stimulate, they can print money, and governments can spend money and incur deficit spending. But again, none of it does any good if people don't actually spend it. And that's a psychological phenomena, and the Fed or the Reserve Bank of Australia or any central bank can print money, no doubt about it, but they can't change people's psychology you need. We had an external shock, an exogenous shock in the form of the pandemic that caused people to stop spending, save more, or they were unemployed, or if you were the unemployed individual. You're not taking your friends out for dinner these days. You're putting money in the bank, and even if you still have your job, you're going to save money because you were, and you might be next. You might be the next one.